It is great to have you join us this morning. It is the 18th of May here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min, and these are the stories we're following at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump says Pyongyang's denuclearization will not follow the Libya model and will provide the North with a security guarantee. But North Korea's point man on inter-Korean affairs says the regime won't sit down with Seoul unless issues are resolved. South Korea remembers those in Gwangju who laid down their lives for democracy 38 years ago today in a bloody struggle against the authoritarian government of Chun Doo-hwan. And a memorial is taking place in the southwestern city this morning. Hawaii's Kilauea volcano erupts again, shooting a plume of ash over 9,000 meters into the sky. Residents of Hawaii's Big Island have been living in fear now for 2 weeks. Our top story this morning, U.S. President Donald Trump has slapped down talk of applying the Libya model to the denuclearization of North Korea. Now, his comments at the White House on Thursday contradict those made by his national security advisor in recent days, possibly hoping to cool the slight uptick in tensions over John Bolton's remark. President Trump also reassured leader Kim Jong-un that he would remain North Korean leader if he gave up his nuclear weapons. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump has rolled out the so-called Libya model for dismantling North Korea's nuclear weapons program, instead offering strong security guarantees to Pyongyang in return for its denuclearization. He pledged that the U.S. would grant the North such a guarantee if a satisfactory deal is struck.
The model, if you look at that model with Gaddafi, that was a total decimation. We went in there to beat him. Now, that model would take place if we don't make a deal, most likely. But if we make a deal, I think Kim Jong-un is going to be very, very happy.
The Libyan model, which has been pushed on U.S. news networks by President Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, calls for a quick dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program with no guarantee of benefits to the regime in the process. Pushing back against Bolton's remarks, Trump insisted protection for Kim and his regime would be very strong if the regime fully denuclearizes.
We're willing to do a lot, and he's willing to, I think, do a lot also. And I think we'll actually have a good relationship, assuming we have the meeting and assuming something comes of it. And he'll get protections that will be very strong.
With all signs pointing to Bolton's mentioning of the Libya model being the reason behind North Korea's recent 180-degree turn, the White House has been stressing that's not the model they're incorporating, saying instead a President Trump model will be used. Will Trump's security guarantee be enough to ensure North Korea falls back in line? With the North Korea-U.S. summit set for June 12th in Singapore, the U.S. and South Korea certainly hope it will be. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And while President Trump is insisting that nothing has changed with North Korea, the regime is still playing hardball with the South. North Korea has again warned South Korea that it might permanently halt inter-Korean discussions unless Seoul stops its ongoing Max Thunder Air Force exercise with the U.S. The regime's state-run media on Thursday quoted Lee Sun-kwon, the North Korean official in charge of handling inter-Korean affairs, as saying that unless the Syria situation, which led to the cancellation of this week's inter-Korean talks, is settled, it'll be hard to ever sit face-to-face with the current South Korean government. Seoul is continuing to urge Pyongyang to come forward for talks to discuss follow-up measures to their recent summit agreement. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is looking to mediate between North Korea and the U.S. as they appear to have, quote, some kind of difference in stances ahead of their planned summit in Singapore next month. Our Moon Gun-young tells us more.
Breaking its day-long silence since North Korea abruptly called off a high-level dialogue within hours the scheduled time and threatened to pull out of next month's historic summit between its leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. South Korea's presidential Blue House said it'll actively perform the role of a mediator to bridge the gap between the two as they appear to have some difference in stance.
The members of the National Security Council Standing Committee decided to closely coordinate through various channels between South Korea and the US and South and North Korea so that the upcoming North Korea-US summit will be held successfully in the manner of mutual respect.
President Moon is traveling to the U.S. next week for a bilateral summit with his U.S. counterpart, during which a Blue House official said the South Korean president plans to convey what he and his chief aides have discerned about Pyongyang's position and attitude, and vice versa upon return from a U.S. trip. The Blue House and President Moon's key security officials do believe, however, that both North Korea and the U.S. are still serious and sincere about making the June 12th summit happen, and Seoul intends to continue discussions with Pyongyang to hold high-level talks that it canceled on Wednesday.
Members of the NSC Standing Committee reaffirmed their stance that the Panmunjom Declaration reached at the April 27 Inter-Korean Summit must be carried out without any disruption and agreed to continue consulting with the North to hold the high-level talks at an early date.
As important and symbolic the April Inter-Korean Summit was to the South Korean president and his team, it's actually the North Korea-U.S. summit that the president has placed his bet on in realizing peace and denuclearization process on the Korean peninsula. So it seems that the South Korean president, who's basically laid the groundwork up until this point, couldn't just sit back and watch Pyongyang and Washington drift any further and away from this hard-won opportunity. 문건영, Arirang News, the Blue House.
And over at the National Assembly, lawmakers are sharply divided on reading the true intentions behind North Korea's cancellation of the high-level talks with Seoul this week. The main opposition party is worried that the North could be purposely trying to drive a wedge between Seoul and Washington, while the ruling party is urging the two Koreas to hold talks before the big summit next month in Singapore. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
North Korea's sudden turnaround has sparked concerns that it may put the brakes on the recent momentum towards peace on the Korean peninsula. During a parliamentary briefing by the Foreign Affairs and Unification Ministries on Thursday, the main opposition Liberty Korea party said that the postponement of the high-level inter-Korean talks could be the start of a bigger headache.
North Korea and the U.S. are on different pages. If this is to continue, the two sides may not even hold talks. And even if they do, a significant agreement may not come out of it, and we could go back to the situation we saw last year. This will then put President Moon in an awkward situation and also put a crack in the South Korea-U.S. alliance.
North Korea has promised complete denuclearization, but like you said, there's a difference between how Pyongyang and Washington want this done. But we are aware that the two sides are in direct communication in regards to the talks. So we believe they will be able to coordinate, and through the South Korea-U.S. summit, we also plan to coordinate with the U.S.
Given the unpredictable situation, some lawmakers questioned about lifting the economic sanctions imposed on the regime so soon, saying that Seoul could see itself fooled. But all parties recognize the need to create the conditions for successful talks between North Korea and the U.S. and the implementation of the Panmunjom Declaration so that it leads to permanent peace on the Korean peninsula. In that sense, the ruling Democratic Party of Korea also said the leaders of the two Koreas should actively communicate through the recently installed hotline.
A hotline has been established, but there's been no talks between the leaders. As a mediator, Seoul has a lot of tasks. I see the need for talks ahead of the South Korea-U.S. summit.
Yes, I agree. The Blue House and the North Korean side will determine the opportune moment.
Rival lawmakers also warned that denuclearization isn't a matter that just concerns the U.S. and North Korea, but impacts South Korea as well, saying Seoul needs to play a more active role in facilitating the talks so that its security interests are reflected in any possible agreement. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we start in Hawaii. The Kilauea volcano continues to pose a threat to residents as it spewed ash nearly 9 kilometers into the air on Thursday. For more on this developing story and other news around the world, we turn to our Aram at the News Center. Aram, it's already been 2 weeks, but this volcano doesn't seem to quiet down just yet.
That's right, Semin. Scientists warn Thursday's explosion could be the first of a violent string of explosions in the crater. This is in part due to the continued interaction with the lava and underground water. The last time Kilauea fired a series of steam-driven explosions was back in 1922. Residents living near Kilauea have been given fresh evacuation orders, and pilots are being advised to avoid the potentially damaging ash cloud. The 9-kilometer-high ash plume scrapes just under the cruising altitude of a jetliner. Scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey say the ash plume is expected to just blanket the nearby area, as it was a high explosion and not a wide one. Well, they do warn that the wind could carry it to as far as Higo, the largest city in Big Island. People are also being warned not to drive until visibility improves. The ash and hot lava, which has already wrecked about a couple dozen homes, are not the only problems, however. A spike of toxic sulfur dioxide gas emanating from more than 20 fissures is also posing a threat. The European Union is taking a united stance against President Trump's decision to pull out of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. On Friday, the European Commission is slated to kick off the process of activating a law that bans European companies from complying with U.S. sanctions against Iran. The move was announced by Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker after EU leaders agreed on Wednesday to activate the so-called blocking statute, a 1996 regulation that prohibits EU companies and courts from complying with foreign sanctions laws. It has yet to be updated to include, to include sanctions announced by President Trump. The process is expected to take about 2 months, depending on how fast the European Parliament and Council vote on the update. The EU has continued to criticize Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran deal, saying it was the best way at the moment from stopping Tehran acquiring nuclear weapons. President Trump has played down the chances that ongoing trade talks between the United States and China will be successful. Beijing's Vice Premier Liu He is leading a Chinese delegation in Washington for talks on averting a potentially devastating trade war. Speaking at the White House on Thursday, Trump said his skepticism stemmed from China being, quote, spoilt.
China has taken out hundreds of billions of dollars a year from the United States. And I explained to President Xi, we can't do that anymore. We just can't do that anymore. It's a much different situation. But with all the years and all the years that you've covered, trade and nations and wars and everything else, you've never seen people come over from China to work on a trade deal. Now, will that be successful? I tend to doubt it. The reason I doubt it is because China's become very spoiled. The European Union has become very spoiled. Other countries have become very spoiled because they always got 100% of whatever they wanted from the United States.
Washington has demanded a $200 billion cut in China's U.S. trade surplus, which China reportedly offered to do by purchasing American goods along with other measures. China has demanded President Trump ease penalties imposed on Chinese telecommunications firm ZTE, as well as end restrictions on Chinese investments in the U.S. Trump met with Liu on Thursday, but the White House is yet to comment on their talks.
Today, May 18th, is a deeply solemn anniversary for the people of Korea. On this day in 1980, 38 years ago, many innocent civilians in the southwestern city of Gwangju who were demonstrating the authoritarian government of Chun Doo-hwan were killed by government troops charged with putting down the protest. And to remember this day and those who paid the ultimate sacrifice in the struggle for democracy, a memorial event is taking place in Gwangju as we speak. And among those in attendance are lawmakers from a number of parties and civilians civilians, as well as Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun. And we will hear more about today's ceremony in our later newscast. But first, our Ko Ryun-hee takes a look back at the day of the uprising.
Thousands of people took to the streets on May 18, 1980, in the southwestern Korean city of Gwangju. This was after then President Chun Doo-hwan seized power in a military coup and took suppressive measures, such as banning political activities and imposing martial law. Protesters were beaten and fired upon by government troops during the military crackdown. This left an unknown number of people dead and thousands more wounded. Although the uprising was quelled on May 27, 1980, a look back in history has proven that it was a victory, not a defeat, as it paved the way for later movements in the 1980s that eventually brought democracy to the country. Last year, South Korean President Moon Jae-in vowed to carry on its legacy by reopening the probe into possible crimes that may have been committed by the troops.
완전한 진상규명은 결코 진보와 보수의 문제가 아닙니다. 상식과 정의의 문제입니다. 우리 국민 모두가 함께 가꾸어야 할 민주주의의 가치를 보존하는 일입니다.
Recently, a rare video capturing the scenes of the democratic movement was disclosed to the public. A private collector notified the May 18 archives of the video's existence in December last year, and the archives purchased it in March. The new video shows soldiers implementing martial law and wounded citizens at local hospitals. The footage will be screened at the archive until May 30th to remind citizens of a pivotal moment in the country's modern history that continues to provide inspiration for freedom and human rights. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
And after weeks of no action, South Korea's National Assembly is set to vote on two contentious bills later this afternoon. One on approving the government's multi-billion-dollar extra budget bill aimed at creating quality jobs, and the other on launching a special probe into an online opinion rigging scandal. The government hopes lawmakers give the green light to the roughly $3.7 billion US budget as it aims to use the funds to tackle the unemployment crisis facing the nation. If approved, the supplementary budget bill will be the second of its kind under the current Moon Jae-in administration. And a vote will also take place on the online comment manipulation scandal. The main opposition party continues to push to broaden the scope of the probe into the scandal that's allegedly linked to a former ruling party lawmaker. The International Monetary Fund on Thursday welcomed South Korea's decision to regularly disclose its currency market intervention records. In a statement, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde said, quote, "It delivers a strong message about commitment to a flexible exchange rate and will help enhance Korea's inflation targeting regime." The Korean government said it will disclose data on the net buying and selling of U.S. dollars every 6 months, starting in the second half of this year, as part of measures to increase currency market transparency. And from the second half of next year, the details will be disclosed on a quarterly basis. The global semiconductor industry set a new quarterly sales record in a first 3 months this year. And South Korea's two chip giants, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, played a big role in the record-setting quarter. But will this trend continue? Our Kan Hyung-woo tells us more.
Samsung Electronics overtook Intel to become the world's biggest semiconductor provider, a position that the Silicon Valley giant had held for 25 years. According to a report from market research firm IC Insights, Samsung's sales topped $19 billion in the first 3 months of 2018, a 43% on-year increase. SK Hynix, meanwhile, sold over $8 billion worth of semiconductors in the first quarter, up 49% from a year earlier, coming in at fourth on the list of the world's biggest chip makers. A report from Semiconductor Equipment and Materials International showed that global silicon wafer shipments climbed above 3 billion square inches for the first time in the first quarter of 2018. Silicon wafers are used for semiconductor manufacturing, and the record shipments indicate a rise in future chip production. However, growth in the semiconductor market could take a hit due to growing competition from China, with the Beijing government promoting heavy investments in the country's homegrown manufacturing industry.
I think the current upward trend will keep up at least until the end of the year. But as China announced that it's going to start producing its own semiconductors near the end of the year, the market price could be affected by how Chinese semiconductors impact the overall supply.
China's decision to invest more in the semiconductor industry followed the Made in China 2025 plan announced in October 2015, a roadmap for the future of the country's manufacturing sector. Kan-Young-woo, Arirang News.
Burning, the latest release by South Korean director Lee Chang-dong, has soared to the top of Screen's Cannes 2018 jury grid, becoming the highest scoring film in the grid's history. The average score of 3.8 out of 4 surpasses the 3.7 achieved by Martin Aid's 2016 comedy drama Tony Erdmann. Out of 10 critics, 8 gave Burning a perfect 4 out of 4, with the other 2 giving it 3. Burning is the only Korean film to vie for the Palme d'Or at this year's Cannes Film Festival. The mystery drama film, which stars Yoo Ah-in and Steven Yeun, is based on the short story Barn Burning, by Haruki Murakami.
Good morning. On and off rain has lashed the northern regions for the past few days with powerful thunderstorms, but we'll finally see the rain letting up today. Dark clouds are moving out to the east, so eastern regions could see showers throughout the day today, while the capital area will only see light sprinkles here and there in the morning hours. And the daily high in Seoul will be breezy at 20 degrees Celsius. Gyeongju will get up to 22 degrees. And Daegu seems to be one of the warmest cities today at 27. And we'll finally have a sunny and dry weekend. Most parts will get plenty of sunshine with temperatures around the seasonal averages. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So rain will linger in eastern regions, but the rest of South Korea will be under a mix of clouds and sun. And North Korea will also have another day of showers, but a sunny weekend is on the way. The warm and sunny weather will continue in Beijing and Tokyo with highs in the upper 20s. Autumn drizzle and gray skies will continue for Melbourne, but it's going to be sunny in Sydney. In Chicago, Friday will have a cooler day and the city will see periods of rainfall. And as for South America, most cities on the map will be under mostly sunny skies on Friday. Taking you to Europe, those of you in Moscow will have a wet Friday and weekend. Lastly, to Africa, expect very hot weather on Friday across Egypt. And that's all the weather update for now.
A day to remember those lost 38 years ago. Now, that'll do it for us at the hour on Arirang News. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye for now.